I'm Ashton Addison from Blockwest Capital for Investment Pitch Media and the Crypto Coin Show. And today on Blockchain Interviews, we have Luigi D'Onorio DeMeo, the head of DeFi at AVA Labs. Luigi, thank you for taking the time to come on, and pleasure to have you here.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me, Ashton. And I've always admired some of your work, so excited to kind of be here and chat with you today.
Amazing. I appreciate that. And I admire the Avalanche ecosystem, and I know AVA Labs is working incredibly hard and efficiently on increasing that and bringing more people into that space. And I would love for you to just start us off by telling us a little bit about AVA Labs, and then we can sort of dive into Avalanche.
Yeah, sure. So AVA Labs is a corporation that is looking to kind of accelerate and really spearhead the growth of the Avalanche blockchain. It provides, many things such as services related to Avalanche, but also builds tooling. So, for example, like API node infrastructure. They're working on help build a bridge, which everybody has used so far. So the Avalanche bridge. So yeah, generally speaking, really just trying to spearhead and kind of really accelerate the growth of the Avalanche ecosystem. A lot of people like to make the parallel to like a consensus for Ethereum. So that's one way to think of it as well.
Definitely. Yeah. Great intro. And I would love to get a little bit more on Avalanche itself. Maybe why do you like it and what's so great about it, and why has it become so popular, do you think? In the last year, it's really just taken off, and I'm sure the trajectory will continue.
Yeah, no, great question. So what do I like about it? I mean, Avalanche really at its heart is a scalable layer one alternative solution. So Emin Gunsier and a few of his PhD students out of Cornell worked on a consensus algorithm that was really the culmination of 30 to 40 years of work, where they kind of really felt like they found a breakthrough. So initially you have something called classical consensus, which is really big in the 90s and before, which is really fast but not really secure. Then you have Nakamoto consensus, which is really what happened from 2008 with Satoshi Nakamoto. That's really more secure but not very scalable. And what we believe is we now have Avalanche consensus, which is both scalable and secure. So with this new consensus mechanism, kind of Avalanche and its new architecture allows for faster finality in terms of transactions. So sub-second finality, meaning less than 1 second, and more throughput in terms of transactions per second than is what's currently available. The other thing is that Avalanche has a very unique architecture. We have this notion of subnets, which is effectively the ability to kind of create permissioned and permissionless additional chains on top of the actual architecture. So, Avalanche C chain is the one that most have heard of. That's the one that's gotten good traction today, and that is EVM compatible, right? So, you could deploy your Ethereum-based applications and whatnot on top of that chain, and that works right. Pretty much all the tooling works out of the box. Mm-hmm. But then you can also have this notion of subnets where folks can deploy app-specific chains or app chains, or they can, have permission chains for supply chain type things, or enterprise or institutional purposes. So it's really a flexible system, and that's what I always admired about it, because I think we don't really know exactly where blockchains will be in 10 years. But having a system that can kind of be flexible for these types of use cases is what's exciting to me.
Definitely exciting. And thank you for explaining that. I think a lot of people are not clear on, there's multiple chains. There's this X chain and C chain, and people are like, okay, I gotta learn all this stuff. And there's a reason. There's a reason for it, right? Because the enterprise there, as you mentioned, I think is super important. And the Ethereum ecosystem does have that as well for supply chain and enterprises that don't want to have fully permissionless chain where maybe they want to privatize some stuff or they want to customize for their business. So that's great to hear that Avalanche also has that ability. And at the beginning of our talk, you mentioned AVA Labs is also focused on the developer side, helping with the APIs. I'm curious because I believe that the development is so important, and making an ecosystem that is easy and understandable for developers to create applications so that people can actually use those applications on top of the blockchain. If the development ecosystem is hard, there's not going to be any apps very many apps and there won't be very many people using them. Maybe you can talk about the development ecosystem, how you're helping it, and how easy is it for blockchain developers that already know Solidity and just regular developers that are working in the traditional space that don't really code in blockchain yet. How easy is it for them to get started on Avalanche?
Yeah, it's a great question. So if you were building a Solidity-based application, you can deploy those smart contracts on Avalanche with very minimal changes. Basically, the only major change is that Avalanche has asynchronous blocks, so you can't use block height as like a proxy for time. That's really like the only major change. Other than that, you can pretty much deploy your contracts. All the tooling is available. There's Gnosis multisig, Gnosis Safe multisig. Snowtrace.io is Etherscan type of explorer. So a lot of the tooling works out of the box, where Ethereum really kind of trailblazed, for us in some respects. So that is the EVM compatible chain. That's the one that is about 14 billion in TVL, or total value locked at the moment. The DeFi ecosystem is really robust and is growing. In terms of developers, we have like 6 or 7 hackathons slated this year. One is, kind of nearing end at the moment, but there'll be so many more to come. So we are 100% focused on the developer community and ecosystem. The next crop of exciting applications should come from Avalanche. That's kind of how we're thinking about it. And, if the ecosystem is what we think it is, then that should be pretty easy to do so, since we are seeing, like 20 to 30 to 40% month over month growth in terms of developer counts and things like that. So it is very exciting. People are coming here. It's cheaper to deploy their contracts, right? So, it's not, the value proposition is not complicated to understand. And there's a pretty robust community. We have about 800,000 monthly active wallets on the ecosystem, right? So there's robust demand, and now I think you're seeing some innovation start to happen on chain too.
Definitely incredible 800,000, and I'm sure that will continue to grow throughout this year. And I know 2021 was a huge year for Avalanche and adoption, more people going over there. Maybe you can talk a little bit about what AVA Labs did near the end of 2021 and how that's leading into the goals for 2022. Sure.
So, Avalanche, the chain really started September 2020. So it's a quite young chain, but the first dApp was really deployed in like February of 2021. So, last year, beginning of the year, first dApp gets deployed, and it takes all the way until like June or so to get these Chainlink feeds set up. And until you have Chainlink feeds set up, you can't really have any lending protocols. And without lending, DeFi is kind of, boring, so to speak. So the culmination of a bunch of things happened at once for Avalanche, and then the tech just, people enjoyed it. So there was a few things. One was the Chainlink feeds. 2 was the Avalanche bridge was deployed. That's the best-in-class bridge from Ethereum to Avalanche. It's the cheapest, fastest bridge with great UX. I encourage everybody to try it. Bridge.avax.network. And, people really enjoyed the experience of bridging their assets while feeling comfortable because of the UX and confirmation times that they were displayed. So that was the second thing. And then the third thing was the announcement from the Avalanche Foundation for Avalanche Rush, which was an incentive program tabbed as $180 million at the time. And that was really structured to kind of accelerate adoption, especially for DeFi on Avalanche. So we saw, very well-known applications such as AVA and Curve and Sushi and Kyber, and all these applications deploy on Avalanche. And, that combined with the native ecosystem that existed and was continuing to grow, really fueled the growth from, 200 million in TVL to 14 billion. And, daily active wallets were like 5,000, and now they're like 105,000. So we're really seeing a lot of growth, continuing to see that growth and excitement. And, I think that really these things were just lined up such that people could actually experience the technology.
That's incredible. And I'm glad you mentioned that Chainlink and the oracles for DeFi. A lot of people don't really fully understand how the prices come into DeFi and why oracles are so important. And obviously you need that before you can start building. But then once that was in there, it's crazy to see how fast it grew. And of course, the grants and the 180 million is going to help incentivize. And I'm curious about that for 2022. If there's developers, obviously there's still going to be more developers coming in to work on Avalanche. Is there still incentivization and grants or groups available for developers to come and start working?
Yeah, so there are developer grants. There's also, like I mentioned, hackathons. The Avalanche Morales hackathon had about $500,000 in bounties. There will be additional ones throughout the year. We also have a Blizzard fund set up, which is a fund with the Avalanche ecosystem and combined with a bunch of well-known VCs in the space, such as 3Rs Capital and Defiance, and that's also for investing in applications and developers as well. So there's really a gambit across the board in terms of what developers can access, whether it's incentives, investment, or grants. And I think they'll find that there's a lot of room from our side to kind of try to assist.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And with the continued growth in 2022, obviously DeFi is continuing to explode just across cryptocurrency. NFTs are continuing to grow. Maybe there's some other trends as well. Where do you think the most growth is going to happen, or are you specifically focusing on any of these areas for the Avalanche ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, DeFi, I think will continue to grow. Hopefully we'll see some real world integration with DeFi. That's one of the next exciting things I'm looking for. Less so these very obscure ways to kind of, increase yields and things like that, but more so how do we decentralize finance? Looking forward to seeing that. But I think that there's a real GameFi explosion looking to happen on Avalanche right now, especially with subnets. Subnets are a really great use case for gaming. You can take, any game that you could think of that requires a lot of transactions, high throughput, and really low fees. You put those on a subnet. What's nice about that is, if there's a big NFT drop on chain or an IDO or something that, raises fees temporarily for the chain, it doesn't really, it doesn't slow down the game. It's an isolated environment. Mm-hmm. And those games could have their own gas tokens, for their own subnet. So there's a lot of unique things that I think people will play with this year and hopefully improve upon tokenomics. And, I think that's what I'm kind of excited about too.
Very exciting. And yeah, the GameFi is continuing to explode. And especially, I feel like the metaverse and these games clog the network a lot. And I think Avalanche could capitalize on that because some of the other chains are struggling there. So yeah, that's incredible. Besides that, are you expecting people, if there's other people that aren't developers and they want to start working with Avalanche, where do you think is the first place or the easiest place to get acquainted with it?
Sure. So we have a page called ecosystem.avax.network. This should really list out a lot of the applications that exist on the ecosystem, so users can go and try it. There's tutorials to kind of figure out how to get set up in DeFi and try the first few applications. There are also that's also creates a great video. There's a lot of videos as well to kind of walk users through how to set up your MetaMask and do your first swap and things like that. So that's a really good place for beginners. But there are also obviously each project has a bunch of Discord channels and things like that to kind of get acquainted with people in the ecosystem. We'll also be having our Avalanche Summit, which tickets just went on sale for. That's in Barcelona. That's the week of March 20th. So that should be our big DevCon, where people can meet people, the community, projects get together, and hopefully we can see there'll be a hackathon towards the end of that DevCon as well. So we're really focused on just garnering the developer community, user community to come together and build a very robust ecosystem, and hopefully build out Web3.
Definitely. And I had one more question about you gave the example of games, but it could be any kind of platform that, they create their own chain and it doesn't clog up the main chain with a subnet. And I've heard of something similar before, I believe, in the Polkadot where they're using Substrate, and it sort of equates the main protocol to being like a layer 0 rather than like a layer 1 where it can work on its own. Is that sort of a good explanation of it, or is it slightly?
It is. It is. Subnets are much more flexible than parachains. There isn't a limited slot of them. They're infinite. So anybody can spin one up. Anybody can fork the C chain, so to speak. Actually, we announced something recently called Subnet EVM, where with one line of command they can deploy their own EVM subnet. So that means if you are deploying a game right now on any of these EVM chains and experiencing some issues, like use Subnet EVM, deploy your own game on your chain, and your users will be able to just like kind of access that. And a lot of the bridging solutions that exist in EVM chains can work out of the box there. So I think you're going to see a lot of this going forward because, for some of these games, it doesn't really matter which chain you're on. You're there just to play the game. And, the fee should be really, really de minimis. And the speed should be really fast. There shouldn't be RPC issues. So these are all things we're focused on, like improving on for the subnet.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. And with AVA Labs, you mentioned there was a focus on developers, but you also talked about investing as well. And I'm curious if AVA Labs is investing in or incubating more projects or in-house projects even on Avalanche.
Yeah, AVA Labs is not really the one typically investing. It's more so the Avalanche Foundation providing grants or the Blizzard Fund, which is the fund where the Avalanche Foundation work together with various venture capitalists. That's our ecosystem fund. So those are, by communicating with AVA Labs and members such as myself and our BD team, we can kind of spearhead people to the right place. In terms of where they can kind of, get the best support from either financial perspective, a marketing perspective, a technical perspective. So those are all the things we try to, really, really assist people with.
Mm-hmm. Incredible. And you did mention about the list of looking at Avalanche apps. Where can people get started? In terms of learning more about AVA Labs, what is the best way for people to get involved and to learn more?
So there is, generally a website. People can always reach me on Twitter. I try to respond as much as possible. My handle is @Luigi D'Onorio. But in terms of reaching out to us, we are fairly connected. We probably get like 100 Telegram introductions a day, so we do our best in terms of responding. But there are many members of the team that are very active on crypto Twitter and Telegram that can usually be reached and will answer. So
awesome. Well, I will leave your Twitter link and AVA Labs links, Avalanche links in the description box below for the viewers as well. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know you guys are working really hard and you're really busy, and I'm just watching Avalanche continue to explode, and it's incredible. So great work so far on everything. I appreciate you coming on to the show to teach everybody about it, and let's follow up in the near future.
Great. Nice to have this talk with you, Ashton.